The Wonderdogs, as in wonderful underdogs. Got here 5 guns reviewed recently to semi-recently, but all falling into that, wow, it's that cheap category that has people wondering if they're any good. Coming up next, we'll be going over these individually. This is all part of an article. If you check the pinned comment or head on over to gbgunsdepot.com, that's where the deeper dive will be. But I want to discuss each of these as well as include some of our video notes from when Tia and I took all 5 of these to the range and shot them side by side. Coming up next on GBGuns. Now, I, of course, have got to warn you, there's a lot to cover for each gun, and 5 of them at that. That's why the article will be probably the most concise and efficient way to get the information on this, but I thought I would also do some talking points on a video for you. There's 5 guns, lots to talk about for each gun, so this is probably going to be a long video. If you're patient and like comparing, go ahead and just let it play. If you want to jump to one of these guns, check the video description or the little red bar underneath the video for the chapter markers. That will let you jump around to each one. What I plan on doing is going through these alphabetically and covering some thoughts I have on it, as well as including those video notes from Tia and I shooting them. And then we'll try to wrap it all up somehow. But that's probably going to be best done over at the article. Let's get to it. First up, simply because it was branded, at least this one, as AHSS. They also go by the brand name of Kor, K-O-R. This was imported by American Tactical, and the model is the AHSS-9. You might note that it's somewhat reminiscent of some other guns that have been on the market before, and visually, this is probably the least impressive of them all. It just kind of looks like a dated basic design. However, it's got some surprises in store for once you shoot it. Magazines are a CZ75 pattern, which is excellent, means they're readily available and very affordable. The sights were one of the things of note. That nice bright green, they are not glow in the dark, they're not photoluminescent, but they grab you pretty well in most lighting. Does have a manual safety, but as you'll see, it tucks so tight against the frame that it's not going to be in the way. However, when it is in safe, it's definitely easily findable to disengage. That's the way I like a manual safety if I'm going to have one. When the safety is up, the trigger locks. You do have the striker indicator back there. Wee bit of a loaded chamber indicator and that the extractor sticks out, but as we've seen on many guns, that's usually not much. The grip is comfortable, the texture is not the most aggressive, and yet this is a gun that just on the range sort of overall feels nice, and both T and I had a good time shooting it. The trigger has a very thin blade safety, which I think is a smart thing to do. That makes it a little more effective. The trigger itself is rather thin, and you end up with light take up to a wall and a good break. It's a fairly crisp trigger. Reset brings you right back to the wall to fire again. Makes it pretty predictable. And overall, it was a very comfortable gun to shoot. Now, this is a full-size pattern type gun, but I think what all of these have in common is they're priced right and built in a way that they could easily be your truck gun, camping gun, that type of thing that you get to have a full-size gun where a full-size gun is appropriate, as in concealment's not the main concern. Maybe it's your bedside gun, or it's a gun to learn with and train with. Those of you that have done much shooting have come to probably realize, like I have, that the bigger the gun is for the caliber, usually the more comfortable it is to shoot. But let's get to the video notes from shooting this thing most recently.
The sights are perfect. I love those sights. The trigger is awesome. The texture is great. It begs to be ran.
Yeah, it's surprisingly, for as, I guess, visually unimpressive it is.
Yeah. Even, I mean, there's nothing really remarkable about it in the hand either until you're shooting it, and it's just a part of you.
Haven't shot this one in a while.
I just, even watching it in your hand is just a joy. Like,
it wants to be run, and
yeah.
it's ready. The sights are great.
It does not move when you shoot it.
Yeah, and the trigger's not magic. It's got a little bit of that kind of roll through push, but it's not requiring any extra energy to put any extra pressure to roll through that. Like, you get to it, you know you're there, and you just continue, and it goes through.
Yeah, it's definitely an all the way out. Don't hold it to the rear. Just use the trigger as it was designed. And
yeah,
like, I even noticed when I was shooting that I didn't have to. My sights weren't going up and down as much as they would on some others.
Yeah, it's just flat, and I'm getting a little bit of gap right here in the tang, almost as if my hand wants to be at a higher angle or a shallower angle than the grip is. But the way the front strap is shaped and the angle of it lets you really drive on the gun. And then that little bit of gap might become some room for play. Let's see if I push my hand in there deeper. Okay, that is certainly a different grip angle to fill it. Let me put 5 through it using the grip angle the gun comes with, instead of forcing it into the grip angle I want to shoot. All right, trying the AHSS PX-9. I did it. Using the grip angle that it wants, which is a steeper wrist pour than I am accustomed to. Yeah, it wants you to drive it. It wants to push. That's nice. Next, and the only compact-sized gun out of the group, although it is one of the heaviest, is the Ermox Defense X-Fire. This got mislabeled as a Glock clone by some folks. The only Glock-compatible parts on here are the barrel and the magazine. Everything else is uniquely different. All metal frame. You can see we've got full-length rails. The trigger is clean, but was a heavier break than I was expecting. From what I understand, that's something that has changed or will be changed. Both the importer mentioned making some rolling changes to the gun. I got one of the earliest ones thanks to a reader or patron who pointed it out as soon as these things were available. But they were very affordable. It's a very nice shooting gun. Fun to have in that, you know, it's got the big cuts on the slide. It's optics ready. We've got a Primary Arms classic dot on here. Gives you the fun of getting a metal frame striker fired gun, usually something that's reserved for a much higher price, but at a rather affordable rate. We did, however, have some notes on the shaping back here. Now, when we spoke with Ermox at the IWA Classic Show in 2024, they mentioned some changes and some evolutions and some other models coming. Whether or not we'll see those in the US has yet to be seen. Hopefully PW Arms in Redmond, Washington will continue to work with them. Now for those range notes.
I remember, I love this gun. I love the weight of it, the texture, the looks. It bites me on my rear knuckle. The width of it right here. I remember mentioning that.
And I didn't notice the last time we reviewed it. It wasn't until sitting here, but it is not a fully pre-cocked striker. It's like a semi-pre-cock. And so as you pulled the trigger, I saw the striker stick out significantly and then go.
Oh.
It was kind of weird to watch from this angle. I missed that previously.
Oh, yeah.
Picking this up, I feel what Tia referenced, kind of sharpish edges on the back. Let's see how it runs. It's a dot, which I'm not a dot guy, but I remember this trigger. I remember it being heavier than I wanted it to be. But once you know that, it doesn't get in the way. I got a little bit of pinky pinch between my pinky and the mag and the bottom of the frame as I do on Glock 19 sized guns.
So that makes me question then the difference between that trigger and the Girsan trigger, whereas one of them makes you truly hesitate and the other one is just a little bit to overcome.
It's because the Girsan trigger builds up weight prior to the wall. It gets heavy like as you're getting to the wall, and then it's kind of a rolling break of a wall that's heavy. The Ermox trigger it's got definitely some spring pressure to get to the wall, but once you're at the wall, you punch through the wall.
Gotcha.
At least that's what I'm feeling. Moving into the G's, we have the Girsan MC9. These are being imported by EAA. This is one of the older ones from a few years ago. They have recently brought them back in as the MC9 Disruptor with the paint job. I think you can get threaded barrels now. Came with a Perry far dot. This one has long since died. However, the irons still work thanks to those integrated backup irons. And of course, you can replace this with an actual sight plate that has rear sights or another optic. I just don't feel the need to, since I can still use that sight setup. This thing also rather slick on the texture, kind of hefty. It's got that big utilitarian feel with not a lot of pizzazz on the style, but what we liked about it was witness window for loaded chamber versus a mechanical thing, and the trigger on this is impressively good. Come right back to a wall, clean break, not a crunch through, not a roll through, just a clean break. Reset kicks you a little forward, but you come back to it and makes for a pretty good shooter. I think if we were to have given this a better shake, we probably would have replaced the battery in the dot. I didn't realize it was dead until we were out there. Just a matter of grabbing things last minute, or maybe put a different dot on top of it, or just gone with irons, because in reality, if you're thinking about it, if you're looking for an affordable, can always trust it gun to leave stashed for a while, you probably don't want it to be dot dependent. So maybe putting a dot on this in the first place was not appropriate for that role, but still a rather comfortable gun to shoot. The magazines, I believe, are SIG 226 or maybe HS Product XD pattern. I forget which one, fortunately, because it's been, I don't know, 4 years or so since I reviewed this. Now the range footage.
No dot. There's a lot of backward recoil.
Okay. Discovered, it appears, yes, the dot battery is dead. So trigger is a little, there's more movement to it and more weight to it than I was expecting.
I was just going to ask you about the trigger.
It's not bad. It's appropriate as a panic trigger. You know, you're not going to have negligent discharges or accidental discharges with it. It was just more than I was expecting.
I was just refreshed to see that I was on the same page with you.
Yeah. I want to do 5 more to see if I can go quick with it. Just to make sure that it's, I mean, anyone can learn any trigger, but does this weight and travel present a challenge to me?
And then how does that also affect your recoil feel, your feel of?
Yeah, because it's kind of, it will kind of force some clenching in the hand. My accuracy not perfect. I'm using the backup fiber optics that are on the dot because the dot's dead, but still able to shoot it.
But it was evident that you grabbed on.
Yeah. Okay. The most recently reviewed of these 5, and in fact, depending on the order things come out in, you might be watching this video before the full review of this. Ranger Arms RA9 Defense 01. It's just marked as RA9 on the gun, but I did some digging to find out a little more about it because I had never heard of Ranger Arms before and was kind of surprised by this thing. Now it does use what they're calling a monoblock construction. You see this black here on both sides, that's steel. There's a big steel chassis, so to speak, inside that. Somewhat akin to how Graham Power has been doing it, but not quite as complex. I've done a little less expensively, which helps keep the price down. This thing I picked up for under $300 and love the texture on it. You know, sometimes Cerakote adds slick, sometimes Cerakote adds a nice feel. The Cerakote plus this fissure texture, plus being able to get my whole hands on the thing, made it a real pleasure to shoot. Also have a dual spring recoil system in there, which helps soak up recoil, and of course that 4 1/4 inch barrel and longer slide helps a bit as well. Magazines are CZ75 pattern, which is excellent for availability. And one of the things about having a steel, and I'm not talking SIG style stamp steel chassis, I'm talking about a big hunk of solid metal in there, is all of your trigger components that are hung on pins, with them going into a steel chassis instead of going into the polymer here, they're not going to wear, there's no wiggle room that can develop, and not much give in the first place. And so you end up with a very consistent trigger, which is exactly what T and I noticed when we reviewed this. Very predictable trigger, very controllable trigger, and also very crisp, in part because you don't have that slop that happens when you're running pins through polymer. Now for the range footage on the Ranger Arms RA9.
I like that one.
What do you like about it?
It's weighted well. The recoil on it is very manageable. The trigger is very predictable. The sights are as they should be.
Arms RA9. That slide is so smooth when it closes. You don't have the chuck. It just rolls in. I am noticing some wear on the barrel hood though. Like, it's maybe right at the limit of what the thing wants to do. I think this is one of those guns where I just have an understanding with it. Like it fits me.
Kind of classically designed, and so it's just a second nature.
Yeah, it's like it's not trying too hard in any one direction to do anything too wild with the trigger, and the ergonomics are just there. These are finger grooves that actually fit me, which may be a first. Nope, I take that back. My middle finger fits, my ring finger starts to get a little bit off, but then it's compensated for by the extra space down here for my pinky to get there. But the middle finger to me is very important. Okay. Onto Tisas is the PX-9 Gen 3. This happens to be the tactical model, but there are others. Been following the PX-9 for a few years now, and the Gen 3 is leaps and bounds in improvement over the Gen 2, which wasn't a bad gun to begin with. You get a very comfortable grip that even has some side contours as well, fills large hands pretty well, nicely. The magazine well, which can serve as a pinky rest spot. Magazines are SIG 226 pattern, Mekar mags. Since it's the tactical, it's got the threaded barrel. We've got optics readiness, fiber optic front, and a blacked out rear. Trigger on this guy, also very nice. And I went right through it that time. Comes to the wall, break. Not a lot of travel at all. Very predictable shooter. It's got a little bit more of a rolling breakthrough, but a very comfortable gun to shoot.
Again, I'm noticing quite a bit of impulse into this area of my hand. It's not hitting my knuckle as much, but it is pushing back a lot. Trigger is great. I love the fiber optic sights. The texture is preferred over this kind of texture because it's not going to dig in to close skin, whatever.
It's the finer, softer, but higher density.
Well, it causes, I think that what it would cause in a high heat, high stress situation is some suction rather than digging into the skin.
Yeah.
So.
Easy.
5 rounds goes so fast when it's fun.
Silly easy to shoot. Predictable trigger. Again, nothing magical, but predictable. And like on the Kor AHSS, it's just a consistent pull through. You just stroke. It's not necessarily a break. And there is a wall there, but you don't come to a wall and break. You come to a wall and then kind of roll through. But great ergonomics, very easy to shoot, very comfortable. Man, that's an interesting mix. Now, all 5 of these are very affordable guns, and again, for prices and where to find them, check the pinned comment, I'll have it in there. All 5 of these have been fully reviewed on the channel previously and have articles over at gbgunsdepot.com. And all 5 of them impressed us for the value. Probably the only one to kind of not fit into this batch is the Ermox, simply because it is a compact size gun. The rest of them are more of a duty or full size gun. And so for that, get something cheap to leave somewhere, secured properly, of course, but you know what I'm talking about. The gun that is the truck gun or camp gun or something like that could easily serve all 5 of them. I think would make for great affordable firearms to help someone get into guns. Great for range practice and time because they've got softer recoil, they're a little easier to control. And while many people shy away from guns like these thinking, well, proprietary magazines and company we've never heard of, the only newcomer companies, Ermox Defense and Ranger Arms, seem to be very well backed. Probably going to be around for a while. Tisas, Girsan, of course, are classics, better well known, and AHSS Kor. We met at IWA Classics in Germany in 2024, and were great folks that seemed to be quite determined to continue business in the U.S., and the business was nothing new. They were very professional folks. So I have full faith in all 5 of these as far as continuation of availability, parts, things like that. And when it comes to holsters, of course it's going to be challenging. Some of them may fit existing holsters of similar designs, or you might have to go with leather. But the funny thing with both parts availability, future availability, and holsters is that all depends on how many of the guns sold in the first place. And it's this terrible chicken and the egg scenario for holster makers and for companies doing parts or aftermarket support, etc. They look at how many guns have sold, but as consumers we look at how much stuff is available. Keep in mind that as imported guns, importers are already out serious cash to get stuff into the country, then they're looking to sell it to continue their operations. They don't have the same luxury or ability always to seek aftermarket support or put money behind aftermarket support like other companies do. However, as we've seen in the past with several imported guns, think of the Springfield XD line, the aftermarket will follow if consumers are buying them. I wouldn't be afraid to recommend any of these to someone, especially given their price point. If anything, let it be an entry-level gun, a gun to get comfortable with and train with. And from there they can decide if they want something a little more common, or you get comfortable with a full-size gun, learn how to shoot, gain some confidence, and then you can move to a smaller gun, which of course is more difficult to shoot accurately. All all of the skills when it comes into shooting required increase as guns get smaller. So full-size guns are a great place to start. The 4-inch 15-rounder like the Ermox X-Fire is the classic sort of do-all because they're generally small enough to carry. Point being, I don't think any of these make a particularly bad choice. I'm curious to hear from you guys what you've picked out of these or which ones you've experienced out of these. They are at a price point where if you enjoy shooting, it's not a terrible risk to try one, and I'd like to hear what your thoughts are on that. Thanks for watching. I tried to keep this as short as possible. If you're looking for more information, you're saying, oh, he didn't give me the specs on the magazine baseplate weight when thrown from the Empire State Building, specs and all that kind of stuff is going to be, of course, in the individual reviews, and I'll probably wrap them into the article for this. Thanks for watching. Having just refreshed with only 5 rounds, but 5 rounds through all 5 of these guns, if you had to pick one, and this is kind of a loaded question because what are we picking it for? Really?
Yeah.
The AHSS Kor.
Yep.
Your notes on?
For the reasons of the sight, controllability, predictability of the trigger, and even though this is a little rough, it's not unbearable.
And that can always get knocked down with sandpaper.
Right. This would be, if I had to pick a perfect gun that needed just a small thing to make it custom for me, this is the one I would pick because grip texture would be the easiest thing to change. Everything else, for me, I just really like the way I am able to perform with this gun and the way this gun performs with me.
Fair.
So what's your pick?
That is tough. I appreciate the Ermox's design and change, and that it's not a Glock clone, but it can use some Glock parts. Shooting wise, between the AHSS, the Tisas, and the Ranger, they're all fun for me to shoot, and I think a part of that is their full size, so the banana has a place to go. The way the FX-9 fits my hand makes me want to drive it, which also can be fun. The ergonomics on the Ranger fit naturally. The ergonomics on the Tisas, my hand can just kind of lazily hold and it's good enough. So I think the Tisas would be the easiest one for me to just pick up and do well without concentrating, without putting effort into it. I think I'd probably shoot best with the AHSS if I'm in a go mode and I'm really driving the gun like it wants to be driven. And I think the Ranger is kind of a compromise between those two. It's a comfy shooter with some potential.
Can only pick one.
Yeah, I think it's hard to go wrong between those three. The sights on the AHSS are awesome. They're my favorite of the sights. And you don't have an option for optics on it or the Ranger. You can do an optic on the Tisas, but it's got a great fiber optic front sight already. I think the AHSS as well. It feels business. It's like, and it's off camera. T and I were talking about this. It's kind of funny / sad because visually this is probably the most boring. This is like, you look at it and you're like, oh, it's a firearm. Like there's no excitement to it, no pizzazz. It's not like that. The new Sarselmaz, like the.
But that makes it great for a truck gun or a self-defense gun, something that you're not going to miss if you have to use it because you've had to use it.
Yeah, it is just...
But that's going to be reliable for you, that is going to be predictable for you. And those, like Graham said, the sights are just spot on.
Yeah. Huh, that was a fun experience. Thank you, patrons, for suggesting this. I kind of kicked the idea because I was thinking about it, and the patrons were like, yes, do it. So that's why this was done. If you enjoyed this video, please comment, thank you, patrons. They are a big driving force behind the channel. Thanks for watching.